Everyone has the same nightmare. You look out the window of your high-rise apartment and you see it. A reptilian shape, distinct against the skyline, rising above the clouds. It is 100 meters tall. It weighs 90,000 tons. And in the movies, this creature roars, smashes a bridge, and starts wading through the city like it is walking through a paddling pool. But I am here to tell you that Hollywood is lying to you. And that lie is dangerous. Not because of monsters, but because it breaks your ability to assess real threats. If a creature that size actually stepped onto Manhattan Island, it wouldn't roar. It wouldn't fight the military. It would die. Instantly. And that is where your problem begins. Because 90,000 tons of biological matter doesn't just disappear. Physics is the ultimate apex predator, and today we are going to talk about the square cube law. We are going to game out exactly what happens when biology violates math, and why a collapsing kaiju is actually a biological bomb that makes a nuclear warhead look clean. You might be thinking, Tom, why are we prepping for Godzilla? That's fiction. But the physics? The physics are real. The square cube law dictates the failure points of everything from elephants to skyscrapers, from drones to supply chains. Understanding why a giant monster collapses under its own weight is the fastest way to understand why a super heavy tank gets stuck in mud, why a massive centralized power grid is fragile, and why bigger is almost never better in a survival scenario. We are going to walk through the timeline of a kaiju event, not as a creature feature, but as a structural engineering disaster. We will look at the liquefaction of the soil, the hyperthermal decomposition of the body, and the biological fallout. If you want to survive the impossible, you have to understand the math that makes it impossible. Before we watch this thing fall, you need to make sure you're ready for the impact. If you want the briefings that separate cinema from survival reality, you need to secure your spot right now. Hit that button. Now, let's look at the skyline. Imagine it is 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. The seismic sensors trip first. It's not the rhythmic, jagged lines of a tectonic shift. It's a singular, rhythmic thud. Impact. Silence. Impact. Silence. You are on the street level, looking up. The creature steps out from the bay. It is magnificent and terrifying, a towering wall of scales and muscle. It lifts a leg to take its first step onto the solid bedrock of the city. The foot comes down. And then, the sound. It isn't a roar, it is the sickening, wet crack of 1,000 redwood trees snapping at once. The creature's femur, the size of a suspension bridge, detonates. It doesn't just break, it shatters into calcium shrapnel under the compression of 90,000 tons. The creature shrieks, not in aggression, but in confused agony. It tries to catch itself, shifting its weight. The other leg buckles instantly. The pelvis disintegrates. The entire skyscraper-sized mass enters freefall. The air displacement alone blows out the windows of every building within 6 blocks. This isn't a fight, it's a demolition. Here is how the population dies in the first 60 seconds. They treat it like a movie. In the cinema, when the monster appears, people run away from the path of travel. They assume the threat is the monster's intent, that it wants to chase them, eat them, or step on them. So they run down the long avenues, trying to put distance between themselves and the beast. That is a fatal error. When the square cube law takes effect, the threat is not the monster's brain, it is the monster's potential energy. When that leg snaps, 90,000 tons of mass is converted into kinetic energy. It hits the ground with the force of a tactical yield weapon. The people running down the street are vaporized by the shockwave, or crushed by the debris falling from the buildings that just had their foundations liquefy. They were reacting to a predator. They should have been reacting to a falling building. They looked at the teeth. but they should have been looking at the mass. Let's look at the math that just killed our kaiju. It is the square-cube law. It's simple geometry with deadly consequences. If you take an animal, say a 6-foot human, and you scale him up by a factor of 10 to be 60 feet tall, 3 things happen. His height goes up by 10. His surface area, that includes the cross-section of his bones and muscles, goes up by 10 squared, which is 100. But his volume, and therefore his weight, goes up by 10 cubed. That is 1,000. So, your giant human is 100 times stronger, but he is 1,000 times heavier. His strength-to-weight ratio just dropped by a factor of 10. Now, scale that up to Godzilla size. A creature 100 meters tall is roughly 50 to 60 times the size of a T-Rex. The weight increases cubically. The stress on the bones exceeds the compressive strength of calcium phosphate, the material bone is made of. The moment gravity takes hold, the bone doesn't just bend, it pulverizes. Physics dictates that biology has a hard cap. On Earth, with our gravity, that cap is roughly 100 tons. Godzilla is 1,000 times over the limit. He is a math error. Here's the complication that nobody plans for. When a building collapses, it is made of concrete and steel. It crumbles dry. When a biological entity collapses, it is a fluid dynamics problem. Living things are mostly water. When the creature hits the pavement, it doesn't just fall flat, it splashes. The internal pressure of that impact forces fluids, blood, bile, interstitial fluid, out of every orifice and rupture point, at velocities rivaling a water jet cutter. If you are standing 3 blocks away, thinking you are safe because the monster is dead, you are about to be hit by a tidal wave of pressurized gore. This fluid is heavy, it is hot, and it is moving fast enough to strip the paint off a car. The splash zone for a creature this size isn't meters, it is kilometers. Surviving the fall means understanding that the creature is essentially a water balloon the size of an aircraft carrier, and gravity just popped it. Let's advance the clock. 1 hour post-impact. The dust has settled. The creature is a mountain of flesh in the middle of the financial district. It is motionless. The military has set up a perimeter. People are emerging from the subway stations, dazed, pulling out their phones to live stream the corpse. But something is wrong. If you were standing near the carcass, you would notice the air shimmering. Like the asphalt on a hot July day, but intense. Waves of distortion are rising off the scales. Then, a sound like a tea kettle whistling, low at first, then screaming. A jet of steam blasts out from a gap in the scales. The creature isn't just dead, it is cooking. The blood pooling in the gutters is bubbling. The streetlights nearby are melting not from fire, but from the radiant heat coming off the body. The kaiju is turning into a biological reactor meltdown. The crowds move in. This is human nature. The threat is neutralized, so curiosity takes over. They want the selfie. They want a piece of the scale. They treat the carcass like a statue. But they are walking into a thermal trap. They don't realize that the air temperature within 200 meters of the body is climbing past 140 degrees Fahrenheit. They start to feel dizzy. Heat stroke sets in within minutes. They collapse, not from radiation or monster venom, but from simple hypothermia. By the time the emergency services realize what is happening, the tires on the ambulances are softening and bursting. The perimeter isn't just a crime scene, it's a blast furnace. The people died because they assumed a dead animal is cold. But a dead animal this size is a heat battery that cannot turn off. Why is the dead monster boiling? This brings us to the second part of scaling laws. Volume versus surface area applied to heat. All living things generate heat through metabolism. To stay alive, you have to dump that heat out through your skin. Small animals like mice have a huge surface area relative to their volume. They lose heat so fast they have to eat constantly just to stay warm. Big animals like elephants have the opposite problem. They have massive volume generating heat, but relatively little skin to let it out. That's why elephants have big ears, to act as radiators. Now look at our kaiju. Its volume is cubed. Its heat generation is massive. But its surface area is only squared. It literally cannot shed the heat its own cells produce. While it was alive, maybe it had some exotic cooling system, gills, heat vents, magic. But dead? Those systems stop. The metabolic heat is trapped inside millions of tons of insulating blubber and muscle. The core temperature skyrockets. It hits 200 degrees, then 300. The proteins denature. The water boils. Thermodynamics says this thing isn't a reptile, it's a pressure cooker with the safety valve welded shut. So what happens when you boil a sealed vessel? You get a BLEV, a boiling liquid expanding vapour explosion. Only this isn't propane, it's monster viscera. As the internal fluids boil, they turn to steam. Steam takes up 1,600 times the volume of liquid water. The pressure inside the carcass builds and builds. The skin, as tough as Kevlar, holds it in, until it doesn't. Hours after death, the kaiju explodes. Not a chemical explosion, but a physical one. Ribs the size of freight trains are launched into neighbouring skyscrapers. Boiling blood sprays over a 3-mile radius. If you survive the fall, and you survived the initial splash, but you stayed in the city to watch the cleanup, you are now caught in a superheated organic shrapnel blast. This is the delayed kill of the square cube law. The energy has to go somewhere. Day 3. The explosion has passed. The heat has dissipated enough that the fires are out. Now comes the real horror. The wind shifts and the smell hits you. It is thick, oily, and tastes like copper and sewage. It coats the back of your throat. You are 5 miles away in the suburbs and you are gagging. In the city, the carcass is undergoing accelerated putrefaction. Because the internal temperature was so high, the gut bacteria didn't die. They went into overdrive. They are consuming the soft tissue from the inside out. The creature is inflating again, but this time it's gas. Methane, hydrogen sulfide, cadaverine. A fog of yellow-green miasma settles into the low-lying streets. The subway tunnels are filling with heavier-than-air toxic gas. It isn't just a bad smell, it is an atmospheric displacement event. The city isn't breathable anymore. People start breaking out their N95 masks. They think, it's just a smell, I can filter it out. Or they use damp cloths. This is the miasma error. They are treating a chemical hazard like a particulate hazard. An N95 stops dust. It does not stop gas. It does not stop hydrogen sulfide, which at high concentrations knocks out your sense of smell before it kills you. You think the smell is gone, so you take a deep breath and you drop dead. Or worse, people try to shelter in basements to escape the fallout. But the decomposition gases are heavy. They sink. Basements become gas chambers. The population is trying to hide from a predator that is invisible and omnipresent. They are sealing themselves into tombs because they don't understand the specific gravity of necrotic gases. Let's run the numbers on decomposition. A human body can produce enough gas to bloat to twice its size. Now apply that to 90,000 tons of biomass. We are talking about millions of cubic meters of methane and hydrogen sulfide generated every hour. The local atmosphere is being chemically altered. At concentrations of 500 parts per million, hydrogen sulfide causes pulmonary edema. At 1000 ppm, it causes immediate collapse and death. A rotting whale on a beach can clear a town. A rotting kaiju clears a state. The square cube law applies here too. The volume of gas produced is cubic, but the area for it to dissipate is just the city streets. The canyon effect of the skyscrapers traps the gas. The city becomes a bowl of poison. We aren't talking about a hazmat team cleaning this up. We are talking about needing an oxygen supply just to enter the zip code. And then nature responds. You can't introduce that many calories into an ecosystem without a reaction. The flies come first. Not giant mutant flies. Remember, physics forbids that. Regular flies, but billions of them. The reproduction cycle of a fly is days. With an unlimited food source, the population curve goes vertical. Clouds of insects thick enough to choke jet engines. Then the rats. Then the stray dogs. We are looking at a localised explosion of disease vectors. The threat isn't the monster anymore, it's the plague carried by the billions of scavengers feasting on the monster. You are dealing with bubonic levels of vector density. Surviving the kaiju means surviving the most intense pestilence event in human history, all localised within the quarantine zone. You aren't fighting Godzilla, you are fighting 10 trillion maggots. Week 2. It rains. The sky opens up and washes the city. People think this is a blessing. It clears the air. It washes away the dust. But gravity works on water too. All that rain flows over the carcass. It mixes with the leaking fluids, the decomposing lipids, the toxic runoff. It flows into the storm drains. It overwhelms the sewers. And then it hits the water table. The reservoir, the river. The water coming out of the taps in the neighbouring counties starts to feel oily. It smells faintly sweet. The sheer volume of biological contaminants has overwhelmed the municipal filtration systems. This isn't just bacteria, it's a slurry of exotic proteins and amino acids that our water treatment plants were never designed to process. The monster is now in your plumbing. The standard survival advice is boil water alerts. People start boiling their tap water. They assume heat kills everything. And sure, it kills the bacteria, but you cannot boil away heavy metals, prions, or complex toxins released by the creature's organs. In fact, boiling concentrates them as the water evaporates. Or people rely on their little backpacking ceramic filters. Those filters are designed for clear mountain streams, not a lipid-heavy soup. The fats from the creature clog the micropores of the filters instantly. The filters fail. The failure here is assuming that contamination is binary. It's either dirty or clean. But with a biomass this large, the contamination is chemical and structural. The water isn't just dirty, it's a toxic solution. The old saying in pollution control is, the solution to pollution is dilution. If you dump a drum of oil in the ocean, it disperses. But the square cube law ruins this too. The volume of contaminants from a 90,000-ton carcass is so high that local water bodies cannot dilute it fast enough. We are talking about millions of gallons of blood and interstitial fluid. If that enters a river, it deoxygenates the water instantly, killing all fish, which then adds to the rotting biomass. It creates a dead zone that flows downstream to the ocean. If the creature falls near an aquifer, the leaching fluids can permanently poison the groundwater for a region. We are looking at a hydrological collapse. To survive this, you don't need a filter. You need a completely independent water source that is hermetically sealed from the local environment. Here is a specific nightmare scenario. Fatbergs. The creature has blubber for protection, thousands of tons of it. As it melts and rots, that fat enters the sewage system. It cools and hardens in the pipes. It binds with debris. It creates concrete-hard blockages in the city's infrastructure. The sewers back up. Toilets stop flushing. The city drowns in its own waste because the monster's fat has arterial sclerosis the entire metro area. You can't flush, you can't drain. The sanitation infrastructure ceases to exist. This is the long-term kill. Disease outbreaks from raw sewage backup kill more people in the months after the event than the monster did falling down. Now, let's zoom out. Why am I telling you this? You probably won't face a kaiju. But you will hear rumours. You will hear rumours of super soldiers, 10-foot-tall bioengineered infantry. You will hear about giant enemy mechs. You will hear about weaponized giant insects. And when you hear these things, the panic industry will try to sell you a bunker. But you have the square cube law. You can look at a report of a 10-foot super soldier and say, wait, his bones would need to be 3 times as thick. His heart would need to be the size of a basketball. He wouldn't be agile. He would be lumbering and prone to stress fractures. You can look at a giant mech and realise the ground pressure would sink it into the mud before it fired a shot. Physics allows you to filter out the noise. It lets you look at a scary headline and instantly know if it's a real threat or just a violation of scaling laws. The danger of not knowing physics is that you prepare for the wrong war. I have seen people buying armour-piercing rounds for heavy exoskeleton threats while ignoring water storage. They are afraid of a cinematic enemy that physics prohibits, while ignoring the bacterial enemy that physics guarantees. If you fear the giant monster, you buy guns. If you understand the giant monster is a collapsing biohazard, you buy Tyvek suits, respirators, and water cisterns. The square cube law is your bullshit detector. It protects your wallet and your mental energy. Don't let your imagination outrun your understanding of biomechanics. Let's touch on the final nail in the coffin: energy density. To move a Godzilla-sized limb requires energy that biology cannot provide. Muscles are just chemical engines. They have a maximum power output per kilogram. To move a 500-ton arm quickly, you need more ATP than a blood system can deliver. This applies to those super soldiers too. If you scale a human up, their calorie requirements don't just double, they skyrocket. A giant soldier would starve to death in a week of combat. They would spend 90% of their time eating. The logistics of feeding a giant army are impossible. The supply chain breaks. Real threats are efficient. Real threats are small, fast, and low energy. Drones, viruses, guerrilla tactics. The big, scary giants are defeated by their own grocery bill. There is one exception: machines. We can build skyscrapers because steel is stronger than bone. We can build excavators because hydraulics are stronger than muscle. But even they hit the limit. The largest land vehicle ever built, the Bagger 293, moves at 0.4 miles per hour. It requires an external power cable thick as a tree trunk. It cannot run, it cannot hide. If someone claims to have a fast-moving giant machine, they are lying about the power source or the materials. Physics is a harsh mistress, and she governs everything. Use this knowledge to sleep better at night. The monsters aren't under your bed. They're too heavy to get there. We've spent 30 minutes killing a god with math. But the square cube law isn't just about bones and muscles. It applies to systems too. Corporations, governments, power grids. As they get bigger, they become exponentially harder to support. They become fragile. Their internal communication slows down. Their metabolic overhead, the cost just to keep the lights on, consumes everything. When a giant system fails, it looks exactly like our Godzilla. It doesn't fight, it collapses under its own weight. And the fallout, the economic shockwaves, the social rot, the infrastructural deadlock, is exactly what we describe today. The giant monster in your life might not be a lizard. It might be the national grid. It might be the global supply chain. And when that beast trips and falls, you need to know where the splash zone is. You need to know how to avoid the rot. Physics tells us that everything big eventually falls. The only variable is whether you are standing underneath it when it happens. If you want to know how to survive the collapse of the systems you rely on every day, you need to be in the next briefing. I'll see you on the high ground. You survived the simulation. Now survive the reality. Equip yourself at the official supply depot. Because if the world is going to end, you might as well look prepared.